Hello, everyone. Welcome to Shining Hawk Healing. I'm Toni, and I have a special guest. It's Andre of Astrology Alert.
Hi, everyone.
That's your YouTube handle, and you guys should go over there because he's got so many things, the political readings and things like that, and you can see him on Linda Grindel's channel a lot, and that's where I mostly see you, Andre, on Linda's channel. So, and then I saw the interview that you did with Kim was really
Yeah, that was
awesome
really fun.
too. That was a good interview. So I just want to start out by just sort of asking you, how did you get started in astrology, and when did you start?
I was 22, so it's a long
Wow.
time ago. It's something that was preceded by learning meditation. And I didn't know that meditation would take me to astrology, but I started to notice as the months were passing and I was meditating, regularly, that I just kept getting this sense that there might be something to the planets. And so still took a while. I had the impulses for months, but it was about a year later or so that I finally went to a bookshop and bought books to calculate charts because computers were not quite coming online yet. So I had to learn to do it by hand, but it's really like basic high school math. It's not all that complicated to create a chart. So then, I got into it. I noticed pretty well right away. I learned the rules enough that I saw two or three things that I thought, this is so weird, because I looked back to 7 years before I ever considered astrology, and I could see that there were things that were too coincidental, around the transits. Like transits are the planets where they are, like today, but you match them up with where they were when you were born. That's how you get the effects. It's the main astrology technique, is where are they today? What are those positions like compared to your original ones? And some things are easy and some things aren't. And then you have to, you get to know what they rule, what they mean, and all those things to interpret. And that obviously takes quite a bit of time,
So
practicing.
you didn't have any, like, I don't even know what formal training is. I've met people who have gone through astrology classes and, things like that. So did you take any classes to learn?
Well, not right away. What happened with me is that I took classes after I was about 2, 3 years into it. Then I took some classes and I learned some more things. But I've always been very, very self-driven around astrology, so that I remember being in the classes and thinking, I wouldn't do it this way. And I was kind of rebellious about what I was being presented with. Part of it was that I was so into it. In the classes, they kept bringing up things that I already knew. So then sometimes I would go, I'm not even going to come to that class because I know that already. And why don't you talk about something that I don't know yet? But that's just my personality. I still got quite a bit out of the classes. Also, what I noticed is I got into the astrology and did the measurements before I read any books on what anything meant. I read those a little after. So I was already getting familiar, and then I could get more out of what I was reading, with the person saying, well, Saturn is like this and Pluto is like that. And I was trying to match all that up. But the main driver was always staying in touch with it, practicing it. The main thing, if you don't have a computer, is to have an ephemeris, which is a book with planet columns where you see where they're going, in the days, and you basically look at the columns and see what they're doing. With a computer, you can do it a little more easily because you can get drawings.
Right.
It's a pretty fabulous tool for people that are learning astrology in the modern era compared to when I was learning it. So, yeah.
So you have this, well, when you were saying it's pretty basic high school math, and I started to laugh because I was so bad at math, and especially in high school and, algebra and stuff. I was very happy to get a D. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, algebra, I would consider more advanced high school math. I'm referring to simple things like cross multiplication. Like if you look at columns and neither column fits what you're trying to do, because what you're looking for is in between,
Mhm.
then you got to do a bit of a, it's actually grade 8 math, like ratios, where you say, well, it's not this column and it's not that column, so I'll work out what's in between. So in other words, not complicated at all, or the idea of basic geometry, squares, triangles, 5-pointed, like pentagons, hexagons, things that are really, really simple. So don't get the idea that you're doing equations, and no, nothing like that at all. No sines, cosines. No, that's, I mean, you can do that. Like a lot of great astrologers are very good at doing complicated math, and then they talk about, complicated circles that go around the earth in a certain way, things like that. I do very little of that. I'm talking about really astrology. You could say it's being able to add and subtract really well, because you do get information from numbers, because planets are listed by position with a number. It'll say 20 degrees, 15 minutes, or whatever it is. So then you have to be able to subtract how far away is that from some other place, things like that. But never, no. I mean, if it's not like functions and relations and calculus. No, nothing like that. That's
Okay.
that's way out there as far as astrology.
That is, I just sometimes I feel like I have like a block. I mean, because I try to understand it, and then I go to places like Astrolabe or Astrolabe or whatever you call that, and I put in the information, and it just spits out. But that's feels really cookie cutter. Like, it could apply to anything or anybody, right? It doesn't seem like you can really get a detailed, thing when you do that. So is there a difference between astrologer and astrologist?
Yeah, I saw that when you asked that question. There isn't, in the sense that they're both saying the same thing, but astrologist is kind of I see that as a kind of a lower end way of saying it. And when I looked it up, it said that you're likely to get that label from someone who doesn't know any astrology, or a journalist maybe. The more there is any connection to astrology, it's astrologer. That's what person is who does astrology. But I know what it means, so I don't get insulted or anything.
Well, that's good to know. I will never call anyone an astrologist again.
Right. There you go. That's the gist of it, right?
So I have to tell you, I started taking this class on medical astrology. Do you know about that? Do you do that?
Yeah, I don't specialize in medical. I just, I have enough knowledge to know when there are health conditions in a chart, but I don't go really deep into the detail of saying things like very specific diseases and things like that. I don't, but I'm aware of it, and it's a definite, it's an important branch of astrology. Yeah.
What I didn't realize was that, and I don't know if you know this, but I use this medicine wheel, to do like readings on energy and stuff. And the 4 quadrants that they go over in medical astrology, they put three signs into each quadrant. And I found that to be really kind of like, wow, I didn't really know that there was such a connection between astrology and like the wheel, or the medicine wheel, that kind of thing. I mean, there's so many different ways people use a medicine wheel, but I had no idea that it could correlate to astrology, and that kind of blew my mind a little bit. I was like, wow.
I mean, the circle is a really universal symbol of all kinds of things. I mean, you could even say, sports are played with a ball, it's a circle. Wheels are circles. I mean, circle is like a magical, figure, and it's not surprising that you would get those connections. And then when you draw 4, like the 4 quadrants, that's used in astrology itself, separate from any other system or from any other classification, just to say that each quadrant in the astrology chart has important meanings, that you apply, like in broad terms. Like, for instance, there's a career quadrant, relationship quadrant,
Mhm.
creativity quadrant, and self quadrant. They're the four basic quadrants.
Wow.
And then within that, you get other distinctions. But yeah, that's totally valid. And by the way, and accurate too, because one of the things that I've discovered doing this so many years is that you get into something and then you start saying, well, that's could be true, maybe it isn't, maybe it is. And then when you experience it, you realize, yeah, it is, because I just went through this, and during these 3 years or whatever it was, that's exactly what was going on. And you realize why they get classified that way, be it more relationship or more self or more career or whatever. So yeah, quadrants are definitely valid, no question.
Awesome. Awesome. So the burning question, for me anyway, is, are we in the age of Aquarius? Are we living?
People ask that all the time. Well, the answer to that is it depends on your vantage point, and it depends on how you want to measure. Because if you use constellational astrology, where in the Vedic system, for instance, they'll use the constellations themselves, these places where stars are congregated. So there's like the Virgo constellation, the Libra, and like that.
Mhm.
So then the logic there is that way back, it's now, I think, something like, I can't remember the exact number of years, but it's been more than 1,000, where they used to be lined up so that Pisces, Aries, they were lined up exactly the same way, but the sky is kind of moving backward very slowly. So then now in a Vedic chart, what'll happen is, let's say a person is born March 23rd, something like that, or March 22nd, which is the beginning of spring in the seasons. And when you draw a Western tropical chart, then you are a 0 Aries or 1 Aries, you're an early Aries. But in the Vedic system, you're actually way back in Pisces, because in the sky, the constellation doesn't line up, right? So in that particular way of thinking, we haven't reached Aquarius yet, and we won't reach Aquarius for another 600 years. So if you want to say, well, when is the age of Aquarius? 600 years from now. Not very useful. That's completely out there, where you think, okay, great. So someday we'll reach whatever that means, right? I actually have a different interpretation. And the way I interpret Aquarius is by what I know about Aquarius, and what I know rules and co-rules Aquarius. And to my mind, because Uranus was discovered in 17, I think in the late 18th century, 1780 or something like that. So that's the co-ruler of Aquarius. And if you look at what happened around that time, electricity was discovered concurrent with Uranus, and Uranus rules electricity 100%. There's no doubt about that. That's 100% true. And then humanity starts to use electricity, and notice that from that period, we get a lot more democracies. Prior to that, there were kings and fascists and rulers, and like the Mongols. I mean, it was all kill or be killed. All of a sudden, Aquarius, which is the sign of the people, Aquarius is the idea of the group, the idea of society at large, and democracy and Aquarius go really well together, right? So my understanding of this is that we are already in the age of Aquarius. It's just that just because we're there doesn't mean it's utopia, But at the same time, someone says, well, it should be better. Yeah, it could be better, but it could be worse. Would you rather be ruled by a king? I would rather not be ruled by a king. When people complain about the US, I say to them, why don't you look around and see where you could be? Have you seen what they're doing in China? Have you seen what they're doing in Russia? Have you seen what they're doing in Iran? That's the difference, right? So to my mind, we're in the age of Aquarius. But, in a way, it's like, when Obama used to say, or many have said this too, about how we're trying to create a more perfect union, right? Countries form, and then you try to make democracy better. And I think the Western world, by and large, is trying to do that, to include more people, to give everybody more of a voice. That's the true meaning of the age of Aquarius. But it's something that is being built. It's in progress.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, as you know. I mean, look at what we're seeing these days in terms of the resistance, right?
So you can't really put a time frame on it. It just,
I mean, my time frame is that we're in it and it's being built as we speak. Now you talk to a different person and they'll tell you no, it's 600 years from now. That's not very useful, as I say, because it's so far away. Who's going to judge that? And then there'll be other theories, and
Yeah.
to each his own. So
what? But do you think it's just the United States that's having the age of Aquarius?
no, because if you think about it, electricity and democracies throughout the world, it's not just the United States, it's the whole planet. It is a major, major force. It has never happened until now. Well, Athens did it for a little bit, and there were a few experiments, but now it's actually the dominant way of governance. I think this is a major advance. I really do. I think it should be promoted and kept, and for all its problems, I think it was Winston Churchill that said, democracy is a horrible system, except for all the other systems.
That's true. Totally true.
Yeah.
So I mean, well, so now I was being very cheeky about my question. When I sent the questions to you, I was like, well, is Aquarius in the seventh house?
It's Aquarius. No, you actually asked.
What did they say? Is the moon in the seventh house? Yeah.
No, well, okay. So the seventh house is one part of the chart. It's the part where the sun sets every day, like the 6 p.m., 5 p.m., 7 p.m., that range. So any chart, no matter what time you were born, will have a seventh house. So the moon, you could be born with the moon there, possible, or you could be born with other planets there, or with no planets there. And then the moon, when it's traveling, because you brought up the moon quite a bit, must be something that really, you find attunement through. And the moon is very important. I mean, for one thing, it's nearby, which, makes it important. Nearby, I mean, not as nearby as like the next country, but it's nearby, where we are. And so the moon, as it's traveling, because it has a 27, 28 day cycle, roughly every month, a little less, it'll go through the seventh house, through there briefly.
Oh, okay.
But then you could get if you think about it, in any planet, let's say when you're born, there's nothing in the seventh house, it's empty. But then planets will circulate through there. And when they move through there, those are periods where relationship becomes an important topic, because that's what that house rules, the seventh house, right? So, I mean, it's a bit of a convoluted, long answer to your question,
but that's interesting to know, the relationships, the seventh house rules relationships. That's good news. I mean, for me, I just want to know.
Yeah, the seventh is that. The seventh is the opposite to the first. First is self, I, my, me. Seventh is other. So it's the partner, partnerships.
Right.
All of those things. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Did you do you do charts for yourself on a regular basis?
For myself, as in, how do you mean?
Well, do you do a chart like some card readers will pull a card for themselves in the morning just to, or an oracle card or something like that? And do you look at your chart to see what's in store for you?
Yeah. That's the main way, to my understanding, by far, the main way any astrologer gains both astrology knowledge and self-knowledge. Now, the self-knowledge part, it's a little unfair, because you can gain tremendous self-knowledge through other practices as well. But through the astrology, it's the constant know where the planets are, where are they day to day, and even moment to moment. And definitely, when you say planet is in a certain place for 2 or 3 years, that has a lot of effect too. But yeah, the answer is, I'm constantly aware of where the planets are, right? That's the logic of learning, because what happens is, when you know where they are, you feel the planets. Like as the moon is moving by and touches your planets, sometimes in more obvious ways, but even in subtle ways, you get better and better at noticing, yeah, that's what that feels like when that is working well, when it's not working so well. It's like you'll see the light of something and the shadow of something, depending on where your energy is at the time. So yes, and when you compare it to saying, do I pull a card? With astrology, what you do is if you're kind of tuning in, you just look at the chart for the moment in time. when you're checking. That's actually a branch of astrology called orrery, where you can answer questions based on the moment in time when you check the chart, right?
Oh,
And depending on what you see, you can see if it's going to go well or not going to go well, yes or no, that kind of thing. So anyway, another long answer to a question where I could have just said yes.
it's okay. I'm all for all of it. So
Yeah.
you were speaking of planets, and I know that Pluto was downgraded from a
Oh,
planet to like a dwarf
yeah,
planet, right?
right.
So when that happened, it felt like everyone was up in arms about it. Did it really throw people off as far as charts are concerned, or all the readings and all that stuff? Did no?
Not to astrologers, because astrologers know better than to throw anything off. The reason is that in astrology, you're really connected to not just the physicality of planets, but actually what scientists say, because scientists themselves tell you that physicality is an illusion and that everything is actually electromagnetic. So you're actually looking at energy patterns. Even though a planet looks really solid, it's not. It's matter in that condition. Like, the Earth is rocky, solid, so is Venus, but Jupiter is more of a gas thing. But basically, they're concentrations of energy.
Mm.
The thing is, the way astrology works, when a planet is discovered, the fact that humanity adopts the force of that planet brings it into the lexicon, and you can't take that away. That's immediately imprinted in the human psyche. Pluto was discovered in 1930, comes online. Also, planets correlate with what humanity is beginning to relate to at that time, which is why Pluto rules nuclear power, because that was the beginning of the nuclear age. And that's not an invented thing. It rules nuclear power, just like Uranus gets discovered around electricity, and it rules electricity, not made up. You'll actually see relationships to people that get hit by lightning, and there are all these Uranus transits, around the time.
Oh my
So
gosh.
they correlate really well. And so with Pluto, though, the significance of that is that around 2005, they discovered that there were all these other Pluto-sized objects nearby, because they get better and better, telescopes and measurement systems. So then they thought, well, if we include all of them, we're going to have a mess, because there are going to be all these planets. And the thing with Pluto you have to realize is Pluto is the size of the moon. It's pretty small. It's a small thing way out there. So the decision was made, we're going to throw it out. And so then we'll stop at Neptune. But then you have to say, okay, wait a second. So they throw it out. What caused this? What caused it, the most key thing, was the first planet they discovered, called Eris or Aries, depending on how you pronounce it. And here's where the magic comes in, because this is the weird pattern of synchronicities that astrologers literally feed on, because they see the synchronicity of, despite science saying things, you see this weird thing happening where, for example, Pluto was named by an astronomer because the daughter of another astronomer suggested that they name it this. Because, in the first place, ask yourself, why are scientists naming these planets with mythical names? That's pretty weird. Why don't you just call them Planet X? No, they go and they find Pluto, the Lord of the Underworld. And isn't it amazing that it turns out to be that? Amazing, right? And isn't it amazing that the girl who came up with the idea never took up mythology after that? She became an accountant. She just happened to be she told her father something like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's out there really far away. It's really cold. Call it Pluto. So he calls the other guy and they call it Pluto, which apparently they were going to call it Minerva, but Minerva was already taken by an asteroid or something, right? So now we get to 2005, 75 years later, and they discover this new thing and they call it Eris, the goddess of discord. First problem is, think about that. It's a goddess, so it's a female figure. And it immediately is the counterpoint to Pluto. Pluto is in mythology, is the excessively dominant male. What does Pluto do? Pluto abducts Persephone, takes her into the underworld. There's a weird thing in that she sort of likes it, but doesn't like it. Some of that is true too, whatever. But point being is, it's the macho, a lot of this MAGA thing is Plutonian fascism. Is Pluto, literally, right? So Eris comes along, bumps Pluto off. That's already a signal that the power of women is rising. And you can see it. It's right in front of you.
Yes.
So it's right there. It's from that point, not just women, by the way. In the myth of Eris, she is this angry goddess who is upset because of being left off the table. So any group of people that have been left behind, with diminished rights, with, so this brings in racial issues, it brings LGBTQT, it brings in women, all of that is moving forward. You can try to stop it, good luck. Very difficult. In fact, one of the things I've often mentioned in my videos and types is Trump is doing a favor, like through his horrible behavior, he's causing more women to come into power. He's actually trying to prevent them from doing that. And instead, they're gaining power. And it'll keep going because, matter of fact, in recent years, Pluto and Eris, it turns out, coincident with the recent election and even with the pandemic, they're square. So they're at odds. And I was saying this early on, that Eris was going to win that battle because it's in a better sign than Pluto for this. And so it's moving in that direction. And now I include them both when I look at charts. Some
so
people even add, you can add other ones. There's another one called Haumea, Makimaki. There are these other bodies. But the problem with astrology is if you're not careful, you can create a chart that is a total mess because you'll have, 40 like asteroids, Pallas Athena, Chiron. Pretty soon, it's too much. So I prefer to go with the known planets, include Pluto and include Eris, and read it that far. Sometimes I'll throw in Chiron if there's something, unusual about a certain chart too.
We hear a lot about Chiron, and Chiron is the wounded healer, right?
It is.
So how does that, Chiron is Chiron a planet or a dwarf planet, or what is Chiron?
Chiron is, like, if you think of Pluto and the moon and Eris, these are small bodies, but they're still, the moon is still, there's a lot of mileage there. Chiron is, I think it's something like 150 miles across. It's a very tiny asteroid-like thing that is floating around between Saturn and Uranus in a 50-year orbit. And yet, it has meaning. Like, by the way, one of the things with Chiron is you want to understand it, right? Because Chiron is the wounded healer. So think of, this is where language often reveals in a pretty obvious way. Chiropractors, that's a Chironian thing, right? What do chiropractors do? Chiropractors are involved in a certain kind of thing where they're always adjusting and they never fix it. Like they fix it a little bit and then you have to go back, adjust again. So it's this perpetual adjustment. And when a person has a Chiron theme, it's like they're always chasing this thing that they can't get rid of. And in the process, though, they become wiser and they become healers themselves. And you often see people with Chiron influences in healing practices. And a matter of fact, one of the more famous ones, and I'm saying this now because it illustrates the Chiron principle, but I'm not sure that he had Chiron, so I could be getting in trouble here. But he definitely expressed the archetype. This guy named Milton Erickson, who was he did forms of hypnotherapy, but he himself had some kind of disease he couldn't overcome, yet he became a brilliant word therapist. Like he could talk you into almost anything through the suggestions that he did with his voice and with what he was saying. He would draw you in, and that's in a way the expression of the Chironian wounded healer.
But he couldn't heal himself.
He couldn't heal himself, yeah.
He couldn't use the words on him. He had no. How is that you don't have that same kind of power for yourself? Just comes through you, not of you, I guess.
Well, I mean, you're getting into really mysterious realms because, no, really, I mean, seriously, like then you could say something like, well, that's just what you're born with, and it's your karma. It's karma that is so big. It's kind of like saying, if you're 5'6" versus being 6'7", that's like you pop in. I mean, people say things like, well, you chose your incarnation. And I respond, well, I don't remember that. I mean, maybe I did. Do you remember that? But
no.
No, that's the thing. So it's more like the idea, the way I understand it is you're part of these big energy systems, and there is very likely a relationship to reincarnation and so forth. But it's not like you can just, like you can choose it the way you would choose food on a menu. I think the choice is sort of set for you based on where you are. It's just really natural to flow in a certain direction and make what appears to be a choice but I'm a little skeptical when it comes to, this idea that it's like you're shopping for a body or something, and I'm going to go there and, I'll get
I
to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I feel so there's like I feel energetically that people who do the healing arts and people who do divination or hypnosis or any astrology or whatever with that has to do with the energy of the earth and the universe and all of that. I feel like we have moved through dimensional time, as time doesn't really exist
Mhm.
in time and out of time, but through the energetic we have moved like to a higher dimensional, what do you call it, vibration.
Yeah, that's a way to look at it. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But that can still be that it's like a giant river, and that's the flow of the river that you're in. So then the logic you're expressing would be you probably were a healer before, or you were already studying it, or then you carry on with something similar, right? So that does make a lot of sense. I mean, I often think probably I was doing astrology somewhere before. It came to me a little too easily, whereas some things don't come easily at all, so
Right.
possibly.
Wow. So this is amazing. Okay, so I want to start. I really sort of been working on just starting with like, because I really am into the sunshine, nature, all of that, and the moon is so mysterious for me. So I just wanted to sort of talk about more about the moon and what I did like that astrolabe thing, and it said that my moon was in Pisces, so I have no idea what that means. So
Well,
how
do you
does that
know
affect you
do you know where the moon is today?
in Pisces?
Yeah,
It
it's in
is.
Pisces. Yeah, it's in Pisces right now, around 12 degrees in that range. So it's coincidental that your moon is in Pisces and the actual moon itself is in Pisces. Um, yeah, so Pisces is the 12th sign. You start with Aries and you go around, and 12th sign, 12th house. That's actually how you study astrology, is get really good at the core meanings of each box as you go around each sign. And then you project the moon into that. The moon is, maybe it's unsurprising to think of it as a more of a daily occurrence, more immediate than the sun. The sun is further away. The sun is actually the deep self, the purpose, the person's inmost desire, their heart, so to speak. The moon is a lot closer. So it's often described as your emotional oscillations. And if you think about it, you just stand on a beach and watch the tides, and they're actually being affected by the moon. Again, not made up. The moon is causing this thing to sway back and forth. And if you think about water, our body is 65% water. So it's unsurprising that lunar movements will affect your own emotions, because that's the water in your system. And this is something you can literally feel when the moon is full. It has a very different feeling than the new moon. The new moon tends to feel kind of flat and dull, and the full moon feels more energized but more unstable. And so you can get really insightful moments, and moments when you lose energy because you crash, literally.
Is that because you're starting into a new phase of the moon, like the new moon? You're coming from a full moon to, is it full moon to a new moon, or how
No,
does
it
that
goes in
work?
between. Like the full moon, when the moon is new, you don't see it in the sky. It's like
Oh.
you have to picture it as the earth is blocking, like, because when you see the moon, if you see the moon, what you're seeing is sunlight. Okay, this is important to realize. When you see a full moon, what you're seeing is bright sunlight being reflected toward you. When you see Jupiter, you're seeing sunlight. That's light that travels for a whole hour at the speed of light and bounces back. And then you see Jupiter in the sky. And the moon, more so because it's closer, right? So full means that the sun can shine on it directly, so you see all of it, but then the earth gets in the way enough to either make it new or partly new, or
I
so
see.
then you're seeing
Okay.
it grow in the sky, and then you're seeing it go down. So you can be born anywhere in between. So then there are people that are new moon, people that are quarter moon, half moon, all that stuff. But the full and the new are the easiest to contrast around, the fact that one is the new moon is more of a beginning, and the energy tends to be not very high. And in fact, in Tibetan astrology, they even call it demonic. They say that the new moon is stay away from the new moon. But the full moon is auspicious. It's when in the Vedic astrology, the Hindus have their festivals. And you do see, by the way, a lot of people that are public figures, people with lots of energy, successful, sometimes just notorious, because like Trump is born on a full moon. So my mind, but you'll
and he's a Gemini, right? Does
he's a Gemini, yeah.
Does that matter that he was born on a full moon and he's a Gemini? Does that make him crazy?
Well, no, what it does is it makes him at times brilliant but unhinged communicator, because the full moon has that instability. But a full moon, it's very bright, it's brilliant. So on some level, you acquire brilliance. But then, at the same time, I mean, he has other factors though, because it's not just that. I mean, that's one thing. The other problem he has is there are these they're called lunar nodes, and he has them next to his sun and moon, and that pops up a lot in people that are literally insane. It's not like people like Jim Jones, which Trump reminds me a lot of Jim Jones. He's the kind of guy that he talks to a group and says, "Here, drink poison," and these guys will just
and they do it.
And they do it. Yeah, I mean, I've often said to these MAGA people, "Listen, you people are idiots, because did he or did he not say to you in 2015 that he had so much money he didn't need any money? Why are you sending him any money? Now he's begging you for money. Honestly, what kind of fool does this? Please, it's so obvious, but oh no, he's the Messiah. Okay, follow the guy." Follow him off a cliff,
So what does that mean to the people who follow him? Does that mean that their charts are connected to him somehow, or they are just vulnerable, or he just has this magnetic personality that can sway most people?
Well, it's all of that, but it's incredibly complicated. Like, imagine now you're trying to pinpoint, because we're not talking thousands, this is millions, right, of people. So if you were doing a study, then yes, it'll be in the chart, but it's because the person is channeling that planet in that way. This is really important around astrology. Like, the idea is that the magic of the birth chart is dependent on you, your will, your participation to make it work better, more insightful, so that you start out with a certain Saturn, Jupiter connection, but with time, you can get it to work better. Then you make better decisions, things work better all around, and including you attract better things. But if you're on a low energy, you brought up vibration earlier. That's a great way to understand it, actually, even though to a lot of scientists, they would say, "What vibration? I don't see any vibration. You're making it up." I know, but people that are in this field, we know what we mean, right? The vibe a person has is very real. So a really good vibe, which is the same etymology as vibration, then attracts better energy, improves everything. If the vibe is low, if the vibration is dense, that's when you get drawn to a goofball like Trump, who himself, I mean, look at the guy. He expresses all his planets in the most corrupt, debased, possible way. Like, for instance, he's got a ton of Neptune in his chart, Neptune energy. Neptune on the high end is the most spiritual planet. On the low end, it is the biggest liar, deceiver, corrupt, con artists, people that are, they're moving their hands around telling you, you're not really seeing this, right?
Magicians, yeah.
So that's how it works. And it brings in a strong measure of your own will, because sometimes the tendency in these arts is people throw too much into the fate bin and say, well, if, I'm never going to make it because I have, I don't know, Saturn square Chiron, they'll make something up that bothers them. And that's not it at all. If you do that, it's like you're condemning yourself to remain in the same vibratory.
I just don't understand how he can sway so many people when the obviousness of him, his outer self is so I don't know, it's so corrupt, and you can see it. It's out there for you to see. I mean, if you really need it to hit you in the face, it does.
Yeah,
And
well, I
people
mean,
still, I
I
don't,
think for that, you have to go to um, bigger, what I would say, the bigger astrological patterns. Like the US right now is in a period that is very reminiscent of the Civil War that we went through in the
right,
1860s. This is true from where Uranus and Neptune are transiting. And so if you think back to the Civil War, what was the issue? It was obviously, very obviously, a racial issue, right? That's what happened. And what's happening today? Same thing. It's the same thing. Why is Trump pulling on these people? Because these people ultimately are relating, they're white supremacists. They're basically saying society should be run by people of white privilege. And then there's a bigger group that is saying, no, it shouldn't. We're going to oppose that. And
right.
luckily, there are more people that oppose it. I mean, we got to cross our fingers, but that's the way it's turned out. I mean, look at even in the recent election, right?
Right.
This is now we're getting into the totally logical world where you just look at facts and you say, come on, I mean, stop talking nonsense. In Arizona, they're complaining, some of them, oh, we got ripped off, like Kerry Lake. Kerry, you were on the same ballot as other people that were elected who were also Republican. The only difference is they weren't talking about, stolen votes, and they weren't Trumpers. And people voted for them, same people that didn't vote for you, right?
Well, it's
Same
funny
with,
that you said that, it's the Civil War, because I was listening to, I think it was my husband. We kind of sit at the table in the morning and have coffee, and he reads the news, and sometimes he'll go, "Oh my God."
yeah, how could you not?
And
Yeah.
I say, "What?" And it's Carrie Lake is saying that they're going to make us all slaves. And
Yeah.
you were talking about the Civil War, and she's talking about how, if she doesn't become governor, then everyone will be slaves for some
Right. But
reason.
see, this is interesting right there. I actually only had that insight pretty recently because I could see different patterns, but then it kind of hit me. All of a sudden, it was like going, the light turned on, right? Because for this, you have to study history too. It really helps to hear podcasts and read books around what was happening in the Civil War. They were telling the people the same thing. The South back then, they were telling the U.S. citizens, if you don't side with us, they're gonna take away our freedom. Which, by the way, they wanted the freedom to enslave people. So to them, freedom represented that. And I don't know if people know this, but apparently they were trying to expand it south into Mexico and Central America. So the idea was to build this huge empire with the slave trade. Now, the North opposed it. Why? Now, think about it. If something is happening and freedom is at stake, the people that are telling you the story of freedom that is wrong, made up, are probably going to fail because, they're saying freedom is enslaving people. That doesn't make sense. Freedom is freeing people. So who won? And now we're in the same place again, right? They're telling you, this thing with Democrats, they're going to enslave us. Well, isn't it you guys that are telling us that freedom of religion means we should do it the way you do it, or women should do what you say, and not have any rights? This is what you call freedom? I don't think so. So then how do you expect the planets that are trying to bring in freedom to support you? They're not going to. Right. That's the answer.
Right, because you're canceling it out. You want
right.
freedom, but you don't want freedom, so
Right.
you don't get anything.
It's a hoax. I mean, for Carrie Lake to say that putting her in power is freedom, how does that even work? I mean, she wants to take away she doesn't want to have proper elections. Then they bring in these ideas that women shouldn't have rights. All kinds of things that reduce freedom. Right? I mean, I was born in the Christian religion, Catholic, but I'm not for this idea that freedom of religion means everybody should be Catholic. Like, what do you mean? That's imposing on someone. You have to do it this way. No, and some of these Republicans say this: we are a Christian nation and we should make everybody think in the same way. No, I don't think so. And the founders said that in the Constitution. There should not be church and state.
Yeah, separation of church and state, which is
right.
The line between the two it's just becoming more and more blurred. Well, if they have their way, it will just diminish because there will be no line at
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
And it's very hard to even find a line these days because it's the fundamental lists
mhm, yeah, yeah,
want it want it
right,
so badly they want to fight and kill people for it. It's just
right,
weird. I don't
right,
understand
right,
that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't understand that. So let's see. Did you when this last election, I'm going to get into politics for a minute, but this last election, did you see what was going to happen in the House? Did you calculate, kind of what
You know,
might happen in the House?
in the house, I actually have to admit that I was being, and this happens. I mean, for the most part, I tried to be totally objective, and if something doesn't look right, I'll say this doesn't look right to me. I was reading it based on Biden's transits, and
Mm,
then I looked at Pelosi versus McCarthy, and I should have been more careful because Pelosi does have some problems there. In fact, one of the things that you see in astrology quite a bit is that when it rains, it pours. Like when you start to see hard events and you see a planet linked, and that thing that happened to her husband
mm,
was a little too active. Like it was a Saturn transit and it was going into the election that was really active. And I thought that the Democrats might keep the House because there are other good things in her chart, and McCarthy's chart is pretty bad. But now we're going to see that McCarthy will probably have a really hard time controlling the House if he even gets to be Speaker.
it's gonna get
So,
it.
I mean, the bottom line is that overall, it was still a really good result for Biden because the Senate stays Democratic. He now is in a really good spot, and there's even this. Now I'm thinking that, and this isn't to give myself an out or anything, but there's this sense that I'm getting that it might even be better to have the House be Republican because this is the Trump problem. They want to get rid of Trump, but they can't get rid of the guy because he is so recalcitrant. He will not go away. So then they keep presenting something that is obviously a loser. They're gonna now we're talking about Hunter Biden, and they're gonna spend time. I don't know what the heck they're doing. Why? Because that's what Trump wants. But Trump isn't winning anything, right? So then they can go into the 24 period more weakened. Whereas if you give the House and the Senate to Democrats, then it's easier to attack that because that's the party in power. And then you reach 2024 and you can argue, oh, we're tired of this, we need change.
Right.
So it may have been a stroke of good luck in a way
Yeah.
to cede the power
But
temporarily.
we may not be out of it may not be, it may not be a fait accompli, right now, because there are with all of the with all of
Oh,
the January 6th things going
that's
on
true.
and
That's true.
all of that. So the House may still change. I mean, we lost a House member this last week, I guess. One of them died.
That was a Democrat.
So yeah. So I
It
think it
could,
was from
yeah, it could.
Virginia. So it could still you could your perception of what the House would look like could still come into play, but
Yes,
it may be a delayed action because of all of the shenanigans that are going on right
possibly. Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, I didn't take that into account all that much, but a few people pointed it out, and it's true because if you start getting, well, I mean, think about it. If they start charging some of these guys, well, then I mean, you'll create it. And by the way, it's not that far away. I mean, serious crimes were committed, and this guy is found out. These Stuart Rhodes and the other guy. You can go to jail for a long time. You have to be careful, and
Yeah.
not to mention all those patriots who hit the Capitol. A lot of them are in the slammer. So
It's
yeah,
just the big fish, the big fish, the guy who's behind all of it, right? The guy who's you can see him and his counterparts in other countries sort of slipping into this lower muck and
yes,
mud, right? You can see them slipping into losing a little bit of power. It may not feel like it, but it's seeping out slowly and they're losing a little bit of control. They're going like, oh, hair on fire situation. So
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
I hold a lot of hope that that things will continue to move into a higher vibration rather than the other direction. So
Well, I think they will. I mean, that's been the main mistake I've made in the last 4 or 5 years is that I underestimated, because it's natural to kind of go, well, okay, that'll fix it. But then it kind of hit me, no, this is it's like a decade problem. This is not a 2 or 3 year problem. We got to sort through it. Just like, by the way, they sorted through it in the 1860s. It was a really nasty situation, and they sorted through it, and things got better, and they improved, and things became more progressive. We're in that same place again. But
yeah,
obviously, it'd be more fun to, oh, everything is cool, everybody's happy. No,
it would be
everybody's
so
not
great.
happy.
It would be so great because it
Yeah.
just feels like things started to get better and then everybody got complacent, right?
Yeah.
Everybody got a little like, oh, everything is fine. And, some of the rules started to slip and it was not, and no one, maybe we were, saying, hey, stop. But,
Yeah.
for the most part, nobody else was going like that because things were going well. Kind of.
Yeah, kind of, but yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That's totally true. And the only thing is that having the resilience and the patience to know cycles can be, easily 5-7 years,
Mm.
and then you're in this nail biting thing. But yeah, one of the things that's great, by the way, is that what this pressure has done is more people now are way more aware politically. And people keep saying things like, oh, they're not going to vote. They're voting. You can see they're voting. People are determined to hold up the fort and show up. And before there was a lot of, oh yeah, whatever, midterms, I'm not going to vote.
Yeah.
So then you get consequences. So there are pluses to this, in what I mentioned earlier too. More women in government is it's a great thing, in my opinion. It's a much needed thing.
It's so awesome. And I have never, the only time I missed a vote was in 2000 when Bush was running, second Bush.
Mhm.
And I voted, but my vote didn't count. Somehow
Oh.
my vote got thrown out. I don't know how that happened, but somehow my vote didn't count. Not saying there was some shenanigans, but there were shenanigans going. I was in New York City at the time. So, a lot of people got disenfranchised in the big cities, just like now. Back then, I think that's when, all of this kind of stuff started, when they started really the Republicans started really going into, we're going to change the way the vote works. We're going to gerrymander the heck out of it.
Yeah. Well, because because they're short. The Republicans are at minimum. If you look at the numbers, they're 5% deficit in the numbers. Like the thing with Trump, when you look at the result, the numbers are very similar to Obama beating Romney and Hillary beating Trump. The percentages are similar. It's just that Trump was really lucky in the way it shook out. So he won with 3 million votes less. Biden won with 7 million more, but the percentage is the same. It's about 5%. So they know they're short, so they're desperate to alter the way it's being counted, or they'll never be elected again. It's that simple.
So do you see them having power in the near future?
My feeling is that the next election will still go Democratic, and that's key. It's really key because they're not ready, in my opinion. They need to lose, to get it straight in their head.
And they need to lose badly, right? They need to lose really badly for them to shake out of whatever fog this is that's causing them to
I mean, in a way, but it's just a little bit like, it's the soccer argument. Like if they're doing the World Cup now, and if you lose 7-0, that's really bad. But if you lose 1-0 5 times in a row, they're going to change that too, because they're going to go, well, this isn't working. We've lost 5 in a row. So the fact that Trump has lost them elections in 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. He's the main reason. So at what point are you going to say, not working? Now, they're already trying. I don't know if you noticed that. They're really trying, but it's hard because he's Jim Jones, right? He's Jim Jones, and he continuously tells his people, no, I'm the one, to follow me. And so
I'm the only one who can fix it.
Yeah. Sure. You're the only one that can fix it indeed. It's true.
So how do people get in touch with you, Andre? I mean, I'm going to put your YouTube channel link underneath this video, but do you do private readings? I don't know if
Yeah.
you call them readings or consultations. Or...
Consultations. Yeah, I do them. And the best way is if you go to Astrology Alert, then there's in the channel, you'll see a link, a tab that says About.
Mhm.
If you click that, it tells you where to go. And then you have to pick a time in the calendar that's open. And then I get the notice, and then it all gets arranged that way. There's no, people don't call me on the phone to do it. It's all done directly on the web, but it's very smooth.
Oh, so you do eat through email?
No, what it is that they go on the web to set up the appointment. And then
Okay.
what happens is we set up a time just like this. We do it on Zoom because on Zoom, I can actually display the chart and talk about the chart as I'm talking with you and explain different planets. And then I record it all. And then you keep that for future reference, which is really useful, which if you're doing it in person or over the phone, it's a little harder because you can still record it, but you won't get any visuals. You'll just get the audio. So yeah.
I love that. I love looking at charts. I just don't understand them, but they're beautiful.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing with that is, I mean, the charts is like anything. If you look at enough of them and you keep working at it, and it shouldn't really feel like work. If it feels like work, chances are you won't keep it up. It's got to feel really interesting. Then in due time, they really speak to you because you spot right away what's going on. You're always, okay, that's where that planet is. And so you're building the situation in your mind as you're looking at it. And especially when you find out what the person is going through and where they want to go next, because then you know what that the impulse, and then you see what the planets are doing, and you can give them really good guidance on the best approach to bring that about. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love what you do, and thank you so much for doing it because it really helps. It really does help. I love when you're on with Linda. I love listening to, your take on things and how you put, how you figured things out. And I'm like, oh, I gotta meet this guy.
Oh, well, thank you.
I gotta
such a nice
find
compliment.
Yeah.
A nice compliment. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that it's like any language, any system. I'm sure you get the same thing with the way you're approaching it. It's the logic that the language then informs your intuition almost. So I'll be doing a chart, and it'll just pop into my mind something that I'm seeing in the chart that aligns with the thing itself. Well, if I didn't know the astrology, it probably wouldn't pop into my mind. That's what I'm guessing, that it's like the universe uses my mind to provide the intuition through the astrology, which is a pretty good way to do it. I think it's pretty
beautiful
cool
way to do it. I love that. I wish, well, it works for me that way too. I mean, I'm being trying to be funny, but it does work for me that way as well. But in a different way. I have mediumship and I'm an empath and intuitive in that way. But and then things do pop into my head, but I go, where's that coming from?
Yeah, I know. Well,
but you have you have evidential stuff, right? You can look at it and point to it and go, this is, look at it. This is what it says, right?
Yeah. Well, but even so, I mean, in the end, whatever, it's still, because if it's a planet, but then it has such a big range, why is it that I'll get this guidance versus that guidance? So in that sense, it's still coming from nowhere for anyone that is getting that intuition. So in a way, it's the same thing, really.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here, because it's a lovely respite from the norm of what goes on, in this this little community universe for me. Because I try, I'm kind of like a little, I don't know, people, I use the wheel and I don't think that, some people really understand what that's all about, but it's okay.
Well, I mean,
the ones who get it, and that's what it was. That's what I'm here for, just to give the messages to whoever is listening.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, no, and there are many, many valid ways to do things. And the other thing is that if you're, in my opinion, if you're really genuine in your interest and in your purpose, it'll keep growing. Because I notice my astrology, what's great about astrology, say like if you compare it to, when I think of, I used to be into sports, and there, there's John McEnroe's famous line where he says, the older I get, the better I used to be, right? True. Well, it's true, because there's no way. I mean, you lose your speed. I mean, yeah, it's a downward trend. But with astrology and any system where you're getting deeper into spirit and doing your best to provide good guidance, it grows and it gets better, it gets clearer. It actually it's a huge advantage to be
Mm,
older, because you have the advantage of experience, of a lot of practice.
more wisdom.
There's
Yeah.
no limit to that, and that's really great. It's a fabulous thing to discover.
So thank you so much,
Oh,
Andre, for
pleasure. It's a
being
pleasure.
here. And thank you for being here. I'm going to put Andre's information underneath this video. And if you love the video, give us a thumbs up and hit that bell to be reminded when I do another video. And I will see you very soon. Walk in beauty, walk in joy, and walk in love. Thank you, Andre. We'll see you guys later.
Thank
Take
you, everyone.
care.